Hello there, everyone. I am your host, the Sea Monster, and I bid you all welcome to my essay video series on Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Godzilla King of the Monsters is the 2019 film in the Godzilla franchise directed by Michael Dougherty and is the third film in what is titled as the Monsterverse, a series created as a cinematic universe during the heyday of a trend started by the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where every major Hollywood studio sought to make such series out of any brand possible. Those such examples being the DC Extended Universe and the Conjuring Universe as ones that have found relative success and longevity, and the Dark Universe and the Amazing Spider-Man series as ones that didn't quite pan out. The Monsterverse stands as a cinematic universe that has found success despite being based in a niche genre such as the kaiju genre. To provide you all with some context regarding my personal stance, Godzilla has been such a big part of my life growing up in a similar league as Star Wars, Jurassic Park, and even Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy when it came to my taste in films. Christopher Nolan's Batman films, the Dark Knight trilogy, also played a part, though not until my teen years. That being said, even as a young kid, I felt a certain level of disappointment towards Roland Emmerich's Godzilla from 1998, as many other people did back in the day who were much older than me at that time, most notably the fan base and even folks at Toho. So, it's safe to say that even with my satisfaction with a good chunk of Toho's output of Godzilla films, I still couldn't help but long for Hollywood to try again and make a better, proper, more faithful iteration of the King of the Monsters. Coming back full circle on this preamble, the Monsterverse has been a rather successful string of films that not only gave Godzilla a proper update for American audiences, but also a series that has been able to satisfy fans of Godzilla and King Kong for the most part, as well as respecting what made those franchises so endearing. Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019, however, was a disappointment at the box office and had a mixed critical reception, making it the lowest received entry in the Monsterverse as of 2021, which would include its follow-up, Godzilla vs. Kong. But I am not here to discuss things like its box office numbers or its aggregate scores on sites like Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic. I am here to discuss the film's overall quality aside from such things. There have been plenty of people on the internet who have reviewed and discussed this film in depth up to now, going into spoilers, Easter eggs and all, some people being very positive about the film, some people being rather negative towards it. However, there is still one person who hasn't quite done an in-depth look at this film yet. Me. Granted, I have talked about this film quite a few times before, in an initial review when I saw the film for the first time in theaters, an addendum made a few months later, and sometime after I had seen the film pretty much 4 times in theaters, which included my first viewing of it. A looking back on it a year after its theatrical release, and in a retrospective video where I went over it, along with Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island, leading up to the release of Godzilla vs. Kong. All of those were made under my banner of G-Force 784. I also did a video where I discussed a scene in King of the Monsters for the Alpha edition of the One Monstrous movement led by the Omniviewer, a fellow YouTuber that was in anticipation for GVK. But this essay video series will be a little different from all those other times. For this series, I will be discussing the film on an in-depth level in order to assess its overall quality, primarily on the side of objectivity, with whatever personal opinion that I may have on it only playing a small portion in that assessment. I will also be making my case on King of the Monsters by only in reference to what is shown and established in the film itself and its fellow entries in the Monsterverse, rather than referring to outside sources such as viral marketing and tie-in books. The latter would include novelizations and comics. So, now that we have gone over what this series will be about as well as its purpose, let's begin, shall we? So, to start things off, I would like to provide some context about the significance of Godzilla King of the Monsters as an entry in the Godzilla franchise. The film was a big deal for many Godzilla fans, myself included, because of it not only being a long-anticipated sequel to Godzilla 2014, but also a potential proper introduction of classic Godzilla icons such as Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah to Western audiences. The film has since gained a following despite the mixed critical responses and the underwhelming box office numbers that it received, with yours truly being a part of said following. No sense of beating around the bush here, so let's get into this bad boy here. The film takes place 5 years after Godzilla 2014, as the world is now aware of giant creatures, referred to as Titans, as well as Monarch, the organization founded to track and study such Titans as a result of the climactic battle in San Francisco back in 2014 between Godzilla and the Mutos. Dr. Emma Russell, the single mother of Madison and ex-wife of Mark Russell and member of Monarch, has finished creating the Orca, a device designed to communicate with Titans in order to potentially quell any future attacks on cities and other such Titan-related events by mimicking their bioacoustics. However, after the Orca falls into the hands of Alan Jonah and his group of eco-terrorists, Monarch, along with the assistance of Mark Russell, attempt to stop the terrorists, only for Emma to turn out to be a key player on the side of the terrorists. Things get even worse when she and Jonah free Ghidorah, a three-headed monster of mysterious origins, in the name of restoring the planet, only for that to be a grave mistake as Ghidorah seeks to become the new Alpha Titan as a means to terraform it via mass destruction, prompting Godzilla and Monarch to try to defeat Ghidorah. Mothra also comes in as assistance for Godzilla and Monarch, while Rodan appears as a rogue Titan that eventually goes on to serve under Ghidorah when the latter takes command as the new Alpha. Godzilla King of the Monsters is a film that takes the thematic core of the MonsterVerse that was first established in Godzilla 2014, about the power of nature, and further expands on them by going into how humanity must coexist with it in order to prosper. On the human side, we have Monarch, who intend to preserve the Titans in order to study and understand them, and when necessary, contain any that may pose a threat, with Dr. Ishiro Serizawa, played by Ken Watanabe, being the most outspoken when it comes to the matter of preserving the balance between humanity and Titans in terms of their roles in the grand scheme of the Earth's natural order. Then we have Mark Russell, a man who is grieving the loss of his son Andrew back in the events of 2014 in San Francisco, whose death being the catalyst of his wife and daughter, Emma and Madison, leaving him. Mark starts off wanting the world to be rid of the Titans, especially Godzilla, the one which he blames for Andrew's death. He represents the portion of mankind that seeks to contain and destroy the Titans by any means necessary, and even if it comes at a great cost. As the film progresses, however, Mark begins to realize that the world needs Godzilla to maintain order among the Titans, and that he should reconcile with him for the greater good. As Serizawa says to him, and I quote, "Sometimes the only way to heal our wounds is to make peace with the demons who created them." And by reconciling with Godzilla, Mark gives himself the chance to save his daughter from a similar fate as his son. While the theme of the importance of balance in the natural order is expanded upon in King of the Monsters, the film also holds a thematic core unique to its own. That thematic core is, as I mentioned earlier, about reconciling with that which have hurt us for a greater good. Mark Russell made peace with Godzilla, who was the reason for Andrew's death and for his family being torn apart, in order for Godzilla to save the world and restore balance, and in turn for Mark to save Madison. But there are other examples of this theme being explored, even if to a certain extent. Dr. Serizawa, who was established in Godzilla 2014 to be against the use of nuclear weapons due to his father being killed in Hiroshima back in World War II, joins the operation to Godzilla's sanctuary in order to help the Titan get back on his feet so that he could rise up and battle Ghidorah again before it's too late. However, in order to do that, a nuclear weapon must be used. Serizawa goes on to make peace with his demon, being nuclear weapons, which was responsible for his wounds, being his father's death, for the greater good, which is bringing Godzilla back. There is another major character in the film that would be worth noting, Emma Russell. Now, I actually have a lot to say about this character, which I will have to save for another part. I'm saving her for later because I want to get through the story and characters aside from her first. And it's due to her being a topic on her own that is worth discussing. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, going back to the thematic elements in King of the Monsters regarding balance, we also have the other side of the coin in terms of the human characters, the antagonists. Alan Jonah is an eco-terrorist who also deals in the black market by selling anything related to Titans and seeks to correct mankind's mistakes regarding its impact on the Earth, overpopulation, pollution, etc., and sides with, as well as provides the needed resources to Emma Russell to awaken the Titans in order to restore the world to a healthier state by any means necessary, even if it means a significant death toll. While Emma eventually seeks to correct her mistakes as a result of her party letting Ghidorah out of his icy prison, Jonah stays committed to the idea of a world ruled by Titans from the beginning of the film all the way to the very end, including the post-credits scene which teases a Ghidorah head to have a part to play in a future film. More discussion on that detail to come in another essay video series. Jonah represents the aspect of humanity who hold a viewpoint that may be seen as understandable, but they go about it in a way that taints it, and leads to them committing actions that, in actuality, lead to more harm than good. Yet even with all the damage that has been dealt, even when so many people are dying around them, even when the world is burning all around them, they still view themselves as in the right, or at worst, a necessary evil, and see these results as what the world needs. There is also Madison Russell, who goes through an arc where she endures a shift in allegiance with her mother. After her parents' divorce, Madison went with Emma due to her father's alcoholism, which came about as a result of the death of Andrew. With Madison being at such a young and impressionable age when her brother died, as well as having witnessed her parents divorced as a result of her father turning to drinking as trauma away, it wouldn't be hard to understand why she would go with her mother when it all came down to the wire in that regard. The film introduces Madison with her showing that she still loves and cares about her father despite having been away from him for what seemed to have been so many years, commenting on how he seems to be getting better physically and doing well with his hobby of tracking and studying wolves out in the wild. Over the course of the film, after she sees her father in person for the first time in years, and seeing him trying to get back to her and go to great lengths to save her, Madison begins to question her mother's campaign after she sees that her father isn't in the safest place he can be, even with Emma's grip still retaining on her. Madison was told that her and Emma were going to help mankind and save the world by releasing Titans, and even went through with it for the most part, but begins to realize the folly of this plan when Jonah convinces Emma to take the chance and let many people like those in Isla de Mara die if it means that the Titans could restore the world to a better state as a result of mankind's negative impact on it. Once Ghidorah calls for all other Titans to do his bidding to terraform the planet after Godzilla is seemingly killed, Madison breaks off from her mother completely, having seen what grief over Andrew's death has caused Emma to do. So in an attempt to correct the error, Madison goes off to steal the Orca and use it to stop the Titans from further destroying the world, luring Ghidorah to Boston in the process. Even if her own life was at stake, Madison was willing to do whatever it took to give mankind a chance to survive, and this act of heroism causes Emma to try to do the same by the end. So overall, as far as human characters are concerned, at least in terms of the standouts, while they aren't the strongest part of the film, they still function well. Not to mention, the acting from the cast as a whole is pretty good, from Vera Farmiga to Charles Dance to Millie Bobby Brown, and especially from Ken Watanabe, who is just such a wonderful actor in everything he's in. Whether it's in The Last Samurai or Inception, Watanabe brings his A-game and a level of gravitas to his roles, and his role as Dr. Serizawa is no exception, especially in the character's final few minutes of screen time. It's also interesting to see Kyle Chandler here, considering that he played Bruce Baxter in Peter Jackson's remake of King Kong, and here he is, doing a great job as Mark Russell in the Monsterverse, which also happens to feature Kong along with Godzilla. Anyways, now on to another section. So there is a discussion surrounding this film regarding its use of an iconic device in the Godzilla franchise, the Oxygen Destroyer. Many fans have criticized the use of the Oxygen Destroyer in King of the Monsters as a way to make an easy callback to Godzilla 1954, the movie that started the franchise, that comes up out of nowhere, especially considering the legacy behind such device as it was used in the 1954 film. The Oxygen Destroyer, as it was introduced in the 1954 film, was used as an allegory to the atomic bombs used in World War II. While the bombs effectively ended the war, it still resulted in a lot of destruction and death, with the scars still remaining in the country of Japan. In fact, the Oxygen Destroyer can be considered as a greater allegory in humanity's capacity to create a power that is just as destructive, if not more so, than what it may be using such power to counteract against, with the great cost being to where those who wielded such power would be left to question whether or not it was even worth it in the end. Now, I do agree that there wasn't much build up to the Oxygen Destroyer prior to its launch in King of the Monsters. In fact, Admiral Stenz, played by David Strathairn, literally pops up in the film to say that the device was launched and that everybody needs to vacate the general area of its blast radius. Like, I think they could have done a better job at setting this up earlier in the film, or even just so much as make a little bit of a mention of it prior to this point, just so it would be set up much more properly for this payoff. However, the film's use of the device is justified as part of escalating the greater set piece in Isla de Mara, escalating the stakes with crisis after crisis after crisis piling on one after another in rapid succession, which goes from Rodan being released during a mass evacuation of the island, to Ghidorah converging on the general area, which prompts Monarch to use Rodan as a means to take out Ghidorah, to the Oxygen Destroyer being launched, to Godzilla showing up to combat against Ghidorah, all of which culminating to the Destroyer's detonation and taking out Godzilla but not Ghidorah. The Oxygen Destroyer was used to represent how humanity overstepping and doing their part in saving the world, such as with the launching of such device at any Titan that happens to be in the blast radius, could lead to an even worse outcome, such as Ghidorah having been unaffected by the blast, while Godzilla, mankind's best hope in their salvation, suffers to the point of near death as a result. It's a bit of a mirror of the Oxygen Destroyer's use in Godzilla 1954 to an extent, considering how a deadly weapon is used to quell a certain calamity, only for the outcome to be far more catastrophic than what could have been anticipated and not worth the sacrifice in the end. So while I understand the sentiment on how the Oxygen Destroyer's implementation in the film could have used a more proper setup, the implementation still serves a solid enough purpose to where it doesn't hurt the film all that much when it's all said and done. Now, there are still some characters of great significance whom we have not addressed yet, and some of you all might be a bit surprised as I say that. For this section, I shall be covering the Titans themselves. While many would view the monster aspect of this film, as well as the MonsterVerse in general, to be more spectacle than story, I would like to challenge that belief. For you see, the MonsterVerse, much like the Godzilla films that come straight from Toho, feature kaiju that actually have character to them, right down to having personalities that make each of them distinct, as well as even some nuance added to them. They may not be the most complex of characters, but to say that the kaiju in the MonsterVerse, or heck, in any Godzilla film for that matter, don't have any sort of depth and are nothing more than props to be used for big action scenes, is kind of sad, considering that the people who made those classic and iconic Godzilla films actually sought to make audiences connect with the monsters just as much as with the human characters, and how Michael Dougherty, in honoring that aspect of the franchise's legacy, sought to have his film do the same. And so, I think it's best to relay how this film does justice in adding character work to its titans. Of course, for this point, I will be highlighting the main four monsters of the film, the big stars, those being Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and Ghidorah. The rest of the Titans featured, who happen to make their cinematic debut in this film, such as Behemoth, Scylla, Methuselah, and that one Muto, are just tertiary and are mainly featured as Titans that would serve the will of their alpha. So, on to the big four. For this section, I'm going to start with Mothra and Rodan, as there isn't quite as much to say about those two as there is about our main hero and villain. So, with that said, let's start with Rodan. Rodan is characterized as a rogue titan who doesn't start out on any one side. He attacks Monarch when they try to lure him to Ghidorah, to where he even shows a moment of glee when fighter jets try to evade him. Rodan boasts a sense of confidence when taking on such small jets, and even boasts such vigor when he fights Ghidorah, only to be put in his place by the three-headed titan. Then, when Ghidorah sets his terraforming of Earth into motion, Rodan begins to submit and bow to his new ruler, and do his bidding. From fighting the military and Monarch in Washington, D.C. with Ghidorah, to fighting Mothra in Boston. Despite his speed and his fiery power from his volcanic wings, Rodan still comes off as a titan that can be taken down fairly easily, even by Mothra, despite her sustaining significant damage from him. Then, after Ghidorah is destroyed by Godzilla, Rodan goes on to submit once more, this time to Godzilla, showing that he cares more about his survival than anything. There isn't much else to say about him, despite the fact that Rodan, despite his limited screen time, still manages to have quite the personality. So, that does it for Rodan. Next up, we have Mothra. Mothra, who's dubbed as the Queen of the Monsters, is characterized as a benevolent being that is also capable of being a fierce and determined titan when threatened. She starts out as a larva and, as a newborn, feels threatened, only to be soothed by Emma Russell's Orca using the proper frequency, and the larva is shown to be a docile creature. Then, after she undergoes her metamorphosis, Mothra rises up with beauty and power as a light to shine through in the darkest of times, such as when she calls out to Godzilla, whom her species shares a symbiotic relationship with. That relationship ends up helping Monarch in finding out that Godzilla is still alive, thus giving them a hope and chance of bringing the Titan back on his feet. Once Godzilla is resurrected and battles Ghidorah for the fate of the world, Mothra begins to help her king, only to be intercepted and greatly wounded by Rodan. Despite such injuries, however, Mothra still manages to defeat Rodan, and use the last of her strength to give Godzilla the power he needs to win the day. But in doing so, she sacrifices herself, giving her life for the greater good of the world. Much like with Rodan, the film makes great use of Mothra's limited screen time in order to give us a Titan with a solid foundation in characterization. Now, on to the two main Titans of this feature, Godzilla and Ghidorah. Let's begin. First, on to Godzilla. Godzilla, the title character, is defined since the 2014 film by his duty as Alpha of the Titans to maintain balance in the natural order. Should something arise to threaten that balance, whether it's the Mutos seeking to reproduce in Godzilla 2014, or the invasive false king that is Ghidorah, Godzilla steps up to quell that threat and will do whatever is necessary in order to do so. We also see Godzilla showing signs of viewing mankind as part of a symbiotic relationship with him, due to evidence of a past relationship in his lair, which is why he doesn't go out of his way to kill humans when it's unnecessary. Even in Godzilla vs. Kong, when we see him attacking and killing humans, it's only when he recognizes them as stopping him from achieving his goal, whether it's going after Kong, who is part of a rival species to Godzilla, or the remaining Ghidorah head being used by Apex Cybernetics to create Mechagodzilla. Godzilla, and by extension his relationship with mankind, represents the power of symbiosis between nature and the beings that occupy it, and how important such symbiosis is in order for the world to keep on turning and prosper. While the threat of some titans may make relations between such creatures and humanity complicated throughout the monsterverse, Godzilla King of the Monsters cements the very core of what the series is all about, the beneficiary power of coexistence, and Godzilla as a character in King of the Monsters throughout the film proves to be a strong example of such power. Long story short, Godzilla stands as a strong protagonist who, despite being a giant prehistoric nuclear lizard, is a character that audiences can get behind and be endeared by. Then there's the film's primary villain, Ghidorah, also known by his code name Monster Zero. Ghidorah is an extraterrestrial life form that crashed on Earth around the same era as when Godzilla's species flourished and had the goal to remake the planet to suit him, only to be frozen in Antarctica at some point after a great struggle with the Godzilla species. Then, when he was reawakened from his icy prison in present day, Ghidorah went on to get back into action, only to be challenged by none other than the Godzilla that we know of today. Once the Oxygen Destroyer takes Godzilla out of commission, Ghidorah begins to terraform the Earth as the Titan's new alpha. Once Godzilla is resurrected and when Madison seizes the Orca, however, Ghidorah considers his position to be threatened and battles Godzilla for a final time. Despite still being too much of a match for Godzilla alone, Ghidorah becomes distracted by Emma Russell when she uses the Orca to lure him away, and so Ghidorah kills her. However, that moment of distraction cost Ghidorah his victory as Godzilla, thanks to a boost of power from Mothra's sacrifice, manages to destroy the alien monster, with the only piece of Ghidorah remaining being the one decapitated head in Isla de Mara that would go on to be used as a plot point in Godzilla vs. Kong. Ghidorah actually holds a variety of personalities, one for each head in fact, with the middle head being a leader who exudes a lot of cruelty, the right head being a much more aggressive one, and the left head, dubbed by Godzilla fans and even by director Michael Dougherty as Kevin, being more curious of certain things and not quite on the same IQ level as the other two heads. While each head may have a unique personality to an extent, all three still share the same collective mindset as one Ghidorah, and that mindset is to remake the world to his liking and destroy any and all that may stand in his way. Ghidorah stands as a sinister, ruthless, and formidable force, showing a great level of power right down to being able to regrow his heads should he lose one of them like the Hydra of Greek mythology, and will stop at nothing to supplant Godzilla as top dog of the Titans. Ghidorah, as he is presented in Godzilla King of the Monsters, is a great villain, and very much worthy of being deemed as the Joker to Godzilla's Batman, a powerful nemesis whom we would all see appear in some form or another, clashing with Godzilla potentially for the rest of time, or at least as long as the franchise may go on, which could be synonymous to the rest of time at this point, granted. So that pretty much does it for this part of my essay video series on Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. There was a lot of ground to cover for this part, and I still haven't technically gone over all the character-related stuff in this film, so stay tuned for part 2 where I will go into the character of Dr. Emma Russell, who, as I've stated earlier, requires a little more of an analysis on her own alongside the general critical perception of her. But until then, thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.